Indentured laborers, World War and the impact of World War, the Great Depression, post-war recovery, and the Bretton Woods twins. So without any delay, let's begin. First, we are going to study about the indentured labor migration from India. What is indentured labor? Indentured labor is a bonded laborer under a contract to work for an employer for a specific amount of time. Or it can be minimum as 5 years, maximum of some amount of years. Now, a bonded labor who is under contract to work for a specific amount of time to pay off his passage to a new country or home. Remember that for 1 mark. The example of the indentured labor migration from India also illustrates the two-sided nature of the 19th century world. It was a world of faster economic growth as well as great misery, higher incomes for some and poverty for others, technological advances in some areas and new forms of coercion in others. In the 19th century, hundreds of thousands of Indian and Chinese laborers went to work on plantations, in mines, and in road and railway construction projects around the world. In India, indentured laborers were hired under contracts which promised return travel to India after they had worked 5 years on their employer's plantation. You can see the pictures here. They were given numbers, the indentured laborers. Yes, in India, they were hired for 5 years. As to say, most Indian indentured workers came from present-day regions of eastern UP, Bihar, central India and right districts of Tamil Nadu. Why? Because those are the areas where the population is high and people are looking for work. The main destinations of the Indian indentured migrants were the Caribbean islands, mainly Trinidad, Guyana and Suriname, Mauritius and Fiji. Closer home, Tamil Nadu migrants went to Ceylon and Malaya. Indentured workers are also recruited for tea plantations in Assam. We have studied about that in the previous chapters. Many migrants agreed to take up work hoping to escape poverty or oppression in their home villages. Agents, those who recruited them, tempted the prospective migrants by providing false information about final destination, modes of travel, nature of work, and living and working conditions. They gave false information to tempt the migrants to come and work. Often migrants were not even told that they were to embark on a long sea voyage. Sometimes agents even forcibly abducted less willing migrants. Now, what happened with the system of slavery is, on arrival at the plantation, laborers found conditions to be different from what they had imagined. Living and working conditions were harsh and there were few legal rights. Workers discovered their own ways of surviving. Many of them escaped into the wilds. Though, if caught, they faced severe punishment. Others developed new forms of individual and collective self-expression, blending different cultural forms, old and new. In Trinidad, the annual Muharram procession was transformed into a riotous carnival called Jose. You can see on the right side. For Imam Hussein, in which workers of all races and religions joined. It's a colorful procession called Jose. The protest religion of Rastafarianism, made famous by the Jamaican reggae star Bob Marley, is also said to reflect social and cultural links with the Indian migrants to the Caribbean. This is meant to say that people went there, some of them escaped, some of them tried to be their own. right? That is what it is. Chutney music, popular in Trinidad and Guyana, is another creative contemporary expression of the post-indentured experience. From the 1900s, India's nationalist leaders began opposing the system of indentured labor migration as abusive and cruel. It was abolished in 1921. Now, this is a surprise for you. Most Indian indentured workers stayed on after their contracts ended or returned to their new homes after a short spell in India. Consequently, there are large communities of people of Indian descent in these countries. Now, these are the people, some of the people that are obviously from Indian descent. Now, if you know about this, you can comment. Please comment in the comment box. One I will give you, that is a cricketer that you see, that is Shiv Narayan Chandrapal, right? Others you have to tell me in the comment box. Now, there are Indian entrepreneurs abroad growing food and other crops for the world market required capital, and the capital was provided by the Indian bankers. The name like Shikari Puri Shroffs and Natukote Chettiars were among the many groups of bankers and traders who financed export agriculture in Central and Southeast Asia using their own fund or those borrowed from European banks. Thus, Indian traders and moneylenders also followed European colonizers into Africa. Historically, fine cottons produced in India were exported to Europe. With industrialization, Britain cotton manufacture began to expand, and industrialists pressurized the government to restrict cotton imports and protect local industries. So, over the 19th century, British manufacturers flooded the Indian market. Food, grain, and raw material exports from India to Britain and the rest of the world increased. But the value of British exports to India was much higher than the value of British imports from India. Thus, the Britain always had a trade surplus with India. In a very short, we can say that they took away cotton from us for very less prices, and they made the cloth and sold the clothes at very high prices, giving them a trade surplus. Now, this is the trade links of India with the world. You can see in the map. Wartime transformation. Now, after this, what happened was, suddenly the First World War in 1914 to 1918 was mainly fought in Europe. Its impact was felt around the world. Notably for our concerns in this chapter, it plunged the first half of the 20th century into a crisis that took over 3 decades to overcome. During this period, the world experienced widespread economic and political instability and another catastrophic war. What happened was, the First World War, as you know, was fought between 2 power blocks. On the one side were the Allies, Britain, France, and Russia, later joined by the US. And on the opposite side were the Central Powers, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Ottoman Turkey. When the war began in August 1914, many governments thought it would be over by Christmas. It lasted more than 4 years. This war was the first modern industrial war. It saw the use of machine guns, tanks, aircraft, chemical weapons, etc. on a massive scale. These were all increasingly products of modern large-scale industry. To fight the war, millions of soldiers had to be recruited from around the world and moved to the front lines on large ships and trains. The scale of death and destruction: 9 million dead and 20 million injured. It was unthinkable before the industrial age without the use of industrial arms. During the war, industries were restructured to produce only war-related goods. During the war, yes, the war led to the snapping of economic links between some of the world's largest countries. So Britain borrowed heavy sum from US banks as well as the US public. Thus, the war transformed the US from being an international debtor to an international creditor. In other words, at the war's end, the US and its citizens owned more overseas assets than foreign governments and citizens owned in the US. Why? Because US as was emerging as a superpower. Now these are the pictures taken from the First World War. There is a sweet surprise for you. If you get the surprise, please comment in the comment box. What happened after the war? Post-war economic recovery proved difficult. Britain, which was the world's leading economy in the pre-war period, in particular, faced a long, prolonged crisis. While Britain was preoccupied with war, industries had developed in India and Japan, and the war, Britain found it difficult to recapture its position in the Indian market because it was busy with war. At the end of the war, Britain was burdened with huge debt loan. When the war boom ended, production contracted and unemployment increased. Many agricultural economies were also in crisis. What happened was before the war, Eastern Europe was a major supplier of wheat in the world market. Grain prices fell, rural incomes declined, and farmers fell deeper into the market. Now, these developments led to huge job losses in 1921. An example is given: 1 in every 5 British workers were out of work. Anxiety and uncertainty about work became an enduring part of the post-war scenario. Now, the supply of wheat, when it was disrupted during war, wheat production in Canada, America, and Australia expanded dramatically. But once the war was over, production in Eastern Europe revived and started to create a glut in wheat market. Like everybody was producing wheat and nobody was there to buy it. So the grain prices fell, rural incomes declined, and farmers fell deeper into debt. Now in the US, the recovery was quicker. We have already seen how war helped boost the US economy. During that one important feature of the US economy was the mass production. The move towards mass production had begun in the late 19th century, but in the 1920s, it became a characteristic feature of industrial production in the US. A well-known pioneer of mass production was the car manufacturer called Henry Ford. He adapted the assembly line of a Chicago slaughterhouse to use the conveyor belt to make his new car plant in Detroit. At first, workers at the Ford factory were unable to cope because of the stress of working on assembly lines in which they could not control the pace of work. Right? But he realized that the assembly line method would allow a faster and a cheaper way of producing vehicles. The assembly line, though it made a single task mechanical and continuous. In that time, if you have, let's say, increasing output per worker, that means you have work standing in front of a conveyor belt. You cannot afford to delay the motion because it's a conveyor belt. You cannot take a break or even have a friendly word with the workmate. As a result, your car is ready very quickly. Now, the first one that was produced like this was the T model Ford. You can see on the right side the T model Ford, probably the first mass-produced car in the world. When people were unable to cope up with the stress, in desperation, Ford doubled the daily wage to $5 in January 1914. At the same time, he banned trade unions from operating in his plants. Now, when he doubled, now this is what happened. When he doubled the wage, what happened? Everybody's income started increasing. Right? The housing and the consumer boom of the 1920s created the basis of prosperity. Large investment in housing, household goods seemed to create a cycle of higher employment and income, rising consumption, demand, more investment, more employment and incomes. So what happened was, people started buying things. They became more consumer friendly. They started to buy things because money was there. Fordist industrial practices soon spread in the US. They were also widely copied in Europe. Mass production lowered cost prices of engineered goods thanks to higher wages. More workers could now afford to purchase durable consumer goods such as cars. Car production in the US rose from 2 million in 1919 to 5 million in 1929. Similarly, there was spurt, that is growth in the purchase of refrigerators, washing machines, radios, gramophone players, all through a system called hire and purchase. What is hire and purchase? Like rent, right? Credit or repaid in weekly installment. The demand for refrigerators, washing machines was fueled by a boom like in house construction and house ownership financed by loans. The housing and the consumer boom of 1920 created prosperity in the US, which led to higher employment, income, rising consumption. In 1923, the US resumed exporting capital to the rest of the world and became the largest overseas lender because it was having a boom. US imports and capital exports also boosted European recovery and the world trade for the next 6 years. All this, as they say, every civilization reached its pinnacle has to go down. In 1929, the world would be plunged into a depression such as it had never experienced before. The stock market crashed, which made the economy go into depression. That is called as the Great Depression. These are the pictures of the war. The Great Depression began around in 1929 and lasted till the mid 1930s. During this period, most parts of the world experienced catastrophic declines in production, employment, incomes, and trade. Agricultural regions and communities were the worst affected. This was because the fall in agriculture prices was greater and more prolonged than that in the prices of industrial goods. Now, the depression was caused by a combination of several factors. There are so many reasons for the depression. First, it is agricultural overproduction. Remember, the wheat was produced more than necessary. Second, in the mid 1920, many countries financed their investment through loans from the US. In the first half of 1928, US overseas loans amounted to over 1 billion. A year later, it was 1/4 of that amount. Countries that depended crucially on US loans now faced an acute crisis. The US attempted to protect its economy in the depression by doubling import duties. Also dealt another severe blow to world trade when the unemployment started to soar. People trudged long distances looking for any work they could find. Ultimately, the US banking system itself collapsed. What happened during that time? In the banks was the withdrawal of US loans. The withdrawal of US loans affected much of the rest of the world, though in different ways. Remember, it had given loans to Britain also. In Europe, it led to a failure of some major banks and the collapse of currencies such as the British pound sterling, and which created to a lockdown of banks. Now, it is said that the US, being an industrial country, most severely affected by the depression with the fall in prices and the prospect of a depression, the banks had to slash domestic lending and they called back loans. Farmers could not sell their harvest. Households were ruined. Business collapsed. Faced with falling incomes, many households in the US could not repay what they had borrowed. They were forced to give up their homes, cars, and other consumer durables. The prosperity that was seen in 1920 suddenly vanished like a puff of dust. And unemployment soared. People, I told you about that one. They look out for work. U.S. banking system collapsed. The number are phenomenal. By 1933, over 4,000 banks had closed, and between 1929 to 1932, about 1,10,000 companies had collapsed. By 1935, the modest economic recovery was underway, but the Great Depression's effects on society, politics, and international relations was too much, proved more enduring. Now, these are the pictures from the Depression. You can see, right? You can see in the pictures about, now you can see your free soup, coffee, and donuts for the unemployed. Why can't you give my dad a job? Banks are closed, people are standing looking for work. That was how the situation in 1929 was. Now, what happened with India and the Great Depression? If we look at the impact of the depression on India, we realize how integrated the global economy. The tremors of a crisis in one part of the world were quickly relayed to other parts. You have seen the coronavirus spreading from one part to another part, where it creates panic, affecting lives, economies, societies worldwide, just like the depression. But India was a country where the Great Depression did not have that much effect. Peasants and farmers suffered more than urban dwellers. Though agricultural prices fell sharply, colonial government refused to reduce revenue demands. Peasants producing for the world market were the worst hit, like the jute producers of Bengal. They grew raw jute that was processed in factories for export in the form of gunny bags. Peasants who borrowed in the hope of better times or to increase output in the hope of higher incomes faced ever lower prices and fell deeper and deeper into the debt. So, thus the Bengal jute growers lament in a poem. Grow more jute, brothers, with the hope of greater cash. Costs and debts of jute will make your hopes get dashed. When you have spent all your money and got the crop off the ground, trader sitting at home will pay only rupees 5 amount. That's what they were lamenting about. In these depression years, India became an exporter of precious metals, notably gold. The famous economist John Maynard Keynes, J.M. Keynes, thought that Indian gold exports promoted global economic recovery. The depression proved less grim for urban India because of the falling prices. Those with the fixed income, say town dwelling landowners who received rent, and middle class salaried employees, did not have any problem of money. So everything became less costed. Industrial investments also grew as the government extended tariff protection to industries under the pressure of nationalist opinion. Now, how did they start to rebuild the economy? The Second World War broke out mere 2 decades after the end of the First World War. Once again, death and destruction was enormous. At least 60 million people were believed to be have killed directly or indirectly. Millions were injured. The war caused an immense amount of economic devastation and social disruption. Reconstruction promised to be long and difficult. Now, two crucial influences shaped post-war. That's the first one was the US emergence as the dominant economic, political, and military power. Second one was the dominance of the Soviet Union. There were two countries which were dominating the world. One was obviously the US. Entry into the First World War had brought end of the First World War, and Second World War obviously had brought the end of the Second World War, and the dominance of the Soviet Union. They made huge sacrifices to defeat the Nazi Germany and transformed itself from a backward agriculture country to a world power during the very years when the capitalist world was trapped into the Great Depression. Now, these are the pictures to show how was the Soviet Union. Post-war settlement. The two key lessons from interwar economic experiences are: first, an industrial society based on mass production cannot be sustained without mass consumption. But to ensure mass consumption, there was a need for high and stable incomes. Incomes could not be stable if employment was unstable. Thus, stable incomes also required steady full employment. Economic stability could be ensured only through the intervention of the government. The second lesson related to countries' economic links with the outside world is that the goal of full employment could only be achieved if the governments had power to control the flow of goods, capital, and labor. The main aim of the post-war international economic system was to preserve economic sustainability and full employment in the industrial world. So what did they do? They chalked out a plan to revive the countries. So thus began the Bretton Woods institutions. The Bretton Woods Conference established the International Monetary Fund (IMF) to deal with the external surplus. The International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, normally known as World Bank, the IBRD. The IBRD and the IMF were referred to as the Bretton Woods twins or Bretton Woods institutions. The international monetary system is a system linking national currency and the monetary system. Bretton Woods system was based on fixed exchange rates. In this system, national currencies, for example, the Indian rupee, were pegged to the dollar at a fixed exchange rate. The dollar itself was anchored to gold at a fixed price of rupees $35 per ounce of gold. Now we have a floating exchange rate, not the fixed exchange rate. World trade grew annually at over 8% between 1950 and 1970, and incomes at nearly 5%. The growth was also mostly stable without large fluctuations. Oh, we are almost reaching the end of the chapter, that is decolonization and independence. When the Second World War ended, large parts of the world were still under the European colonial rule. Over the next 2 decades, most colonies in Asia and Africa emerged as free, independent nations. They were, however, burdened by poverty, lack of resources. So the IMF and the World Bank were designed to meet the financial needs of the industrial countries. Though, look at the irony here, those were the countries which were suppressed by the same countries which had established the IMF and the World Bank. Like large corporations of other powerful countries, US often managed to secure rights to exploit developing countries' natural resources very cheaply. That is why the idea of having a IMF or the World Bank. At the same time, many developing countries did not benefit from this growth, so they organized themselves to a group called Group of 77, or else called as G77, to demand a new international economic order, NIEO. They meant a system that would give them a real control over their resources, more development assistance, fair price for raw materials, and better access for their manufactured goods in developed countries' markets. Now, the end of Bretton Woods and the beginning of globalization. Despite years of stable, rapid growth post-war world, in 1960s, rising cost of overseas involvement weakened the US finance and competitive strength. The US dollar no longer demanded confidence as the world's principal currency. It could not maintain its value in relation to gold. It led to the collapse of the fixed exchange, and they brought out a new system called floating exchange. The industrial world was also hit by unemployment that began rising in mid-1970 till 1990. 1990 was a time where India opened to globalization, liberalization and privatization. From the late 1970s, MNCs started to shift production to low-wage Asian countries like China. New economic policy in China and collapse of the Soviet Union. Remember, Soviet Union collapsed, and Russia. Soviet-style communism in Eastern Europe brought many countries back into the fold of the world economy. In the last 2 decades of the world's economic geography, countries have been transformed, such as India, China, and Brazil, have undergone rapid economic transformation, leading to the other countries or the MNCs coming into their country and investing in that country, yeah, leading into globalization. Oh, how does the globalization happen? What are the benefits of globalization? We will study that in economics chapter, globalization. This is the Bretton Woods Committee. Well, that brings to the end of this chapter. I know there are few things that you might have missed out. I suggest you watch the video again and be ready with the questions. I will answer your questions based on this chapter. So till then, it's goodbye from me. Thank you for watching. Pleasure.